It started with the wind, or what I thought was the wind. Long, breathy currents moving through the grass behind the barn, rustling the yellowed stalks in a pattern that didn't quite make sense. Not random like weather, not like nature, almost like a rhythm. We were 3 students from the city, Eli, Marta, and me, sent to document rural decay for a thesis in urban anthropology. The project had sounded romantic at first, cataloging derelict structures, interviewing the last of the locals, watching nature reclaim forgotten corners of the world. That's how we ended up in Knox County, parked beside a skeletal barn and a concrete silo that leaned just slightly, like it had been listening to the wrong song for too many years. Eli was obsessed with the silo from the moment we arrived. "You ever seen one that shape?" he asked, shielding his eyes from the afternoon sun. "It's older than the barn, I bet. Look how thick those walls are." Marta rolled her eyes and adjusted her field recorder. "It's a storage tube, not a tomb. You're not Indiana Jones." But even then, something about it felt heavy, like the air around it pressed differently, thicker and harder to breathe. The opening at the top was partially covered with corrugated metal, peeled back like something had tried to claw its way out. We set up camp in the old house nearby, windows busted, furniture draped in drop cloths that looked like stretched skin. The floor creaked under our feet in ways that didn't always match where we were walking. We joked that the place had good bones and lit a fire outside with scrap wood. The sun sank behind the tree line in a slow, syrupy fade. That's when we heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible at first. A high, whispery sound, rising and falling like breath. It wasn't the wind. The trees weren't moving. The fire barely flickered, but the sound was unmistakable. It came from the direction of the silo. Marta heard it first. "Did you hear that?" she asked, head tilted. "No," I said automatically, even though I had. We all went still. And there it was again. Faint, distant, like someone speaking under their breath, just below the level of understanding. Eli stood. "That came from inside." "Don't," Marta said, but she didn't stop him. None of us did. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the silo. The concrete looked almost blue in the moonlight, streaked with rust and the long shadows of dead vines. We followed at a distance, our boots crunching the gravel too loudly. When we got closer, Eli pointed the beam down into the opening. "It's empty," he said. But it wasn't. I leaned over the rim carefully. There was a rusted ladder leading down, bolted to the inner wall. At the bottom, maybe 30 feet down, there was something. Not movement, but a shadow that didn't match the shape of the silo floor. A circle of something black, like water or oil, perfectly still. No reflection. And then, the whisper again. Louder now, closer. It said one word. "Stay." I stumbled back from the edge, heart in my throat. I wanted to believe it was the wind funneling down, creating some acoustic illusion. That would have been the rational explanation. Except it wasn't my name that had been spoken. It was Marta's. She was already walking backward. Eli looked shaken but fascinated. He kept the flashlight pointed down, as if willing the darkness to explain itself. The whisper came again. This time, it said my name. We left the silo alone that night, closed the hatch with a piece of wood and a rusted chain we found in the barn. None of us spoke much after that. We went back to the house. Marta couldn't sleep. I couldn't either. At one point, just before dawn, I sat up and looked out the broken window facing the silo. There was light coming from inside it. Not bright, just enough to know it hadn't come from us. And in that soft, flickering light, something moved. Something long. Something thin. Something that touched the ladder without needing to climb. By morning, the light in the silo was gone. The air outside smelled of dew and scorched metal. No one said anything over breakfast, which was just warm bottled water and a few energy bars none of us finished. We kept glancing at the silo like it might turn to face us. Marta was the first to break the silence. "I recorded it." Eli looked up sharply. "What?" She tapped her field recorder. "I left it running, near the barn. I haven't listened to it yet." We all gathered around her laptop on the dusty kitchen table, windows open to let in some kind of courage with the breeze. The audio crackled at first. Wind, cicadas, the faint hum of our own voices. Then, around the 3-minute mark, the background noise dipped, and there it was, the whisper. Only this time, it wasn't whispering our names. It was counting. 6, 7, 8. Eli stopped the playback. It counted to 8. There's 3 of us. Marta rewound it. Number "it" started at 4. The second listen confirmed it. A voice, thin and ragged and disturbingly close to the microphone, whispering, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Marta looked pale. "I don't like this." It was standing near the recorder, close enough to touch it. I looked out the window again. The silo hadn't moved, of course, but it felt different, like it was aware of us now. "We should leave," I said. Eli shook his head. "Number, I need to go down there." It wasn't bravado in his voice. It was obsession. Marta grabbed his arm. "You're not going down into that thing. We don't know what's inside. That voice. It's not a draft. It's not acoustics. It's something else." He didn't argue. He just walked outside. We followed. The silo loomed in the overcast light, dull gray and flecked with moss. The hatch still held, but something had shifted. The chain we'd wrapped around it was on the ground, uncoiled, like it had been undone from the inside. Eli stood at the opening, flashlight in hand, backpack over his shoulder. "I'm just going to take a look. I'll be back in 5 minutes." "No," I said. But he was already climbing down. His boots hit each rung with a hollow echo that made my teeth clench. 30 seconds in, the beam of his flashlight disappeared. He stopped responding after 4 minutes. Marta and I called down until our throats hurt, but no answer came. Just silence. Thicker than before. I don't know how long we waited. Long enough for the sun to shift angles. Long enough for that damn whisper to start again. But this time, it didn't count. This time, it said something else. He stayed. We backed away from the silo and didn't stop until we were halfway to the main road, our equipment forgotten, hearts pounding. I had no explanation, no rational framework to lean on. Marta cried quietly as we walked, not from fear exactly, but from the unbearable weight of what we had left behind. When we reached the car, parked crooked along the edge of a broken fence, we both turned to look back, half expecting to see Eli waving at us from the trees. But the only thing we saw was the top of the silo, just barely visible above the pines. A new light was flickering from inside it. I couldn't sleep that night. Marta passed out from sheer exhaustion in the passenger seat, but I stayed behind the wheel, staring at the empty road ahead. The motel we found just outside of town had no other guests. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions. He just handed over the keys and shut his door. At 2:12 a.m., the light came on in the room across from ours. No one had checked in. I sat upright, heart racing, the pale blue glow from the old TV screen flickering behind the curtains across the lot. Marta stirred, looked at me, and didn't even have to ask. I pointed. Her face went cold. We didn't move for an hour. In the morning, the light was gone. We packed up and drove without speaking. By noon, we were back in the city. 3 days passed. Then Eli texted me. I was at my office desk, catching up on emails, trying to pretend that everything that had happened was part of some shared hallucination. The message was simple. Still here. Come back. No punctuation, no photo, no typing bubble after. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before showing it to Marta. "His number's been disconnected," she said quietly. I checked. "I've been checking." I tried to call anyway, straight to voicemail. That night, I played the recording again, the one from Marta's device, and I heard something I hadn't noticed before. After the counting, after the whisper said, "He stayed," it said one more thing. So quiet I had to boost the gain 3 times to make it out. One leaves. One forgets. One returns. I dropped my headphones. I wish I could tell you that I forgot about the silo, that Marta and I moved on, finished our degrees, never spoke of it again. But that's not what happened. Marta stopped answering my calls 2 weeks later. Her roommate said she'd packed up and left one night without a word. Left her books, her laptop, everything. I still see her sometimes, in crowds, at crosswalks, at train stations, always distant, never close enough to speak. Her eyes look wrong, like something else is seeing through them. And me? I kept the journal, Eli's field book, the one he left open on the table in the old kitchen. I found it in the car's trunk a week later, even though I know, he took it down into the silo with him. There are pages now I don't remember reading before. Maps that move, drawings of the silo's interior that are more detailed than we ever saw. One page reads only, "The deeper you listen, the closer they come." I stopped listening, but sometimes, when the room is quiet and the lights are off, I still hear it, the counting, and I'm terrified of what comes after 10. I've lived on this land my whole life. Ranching's not glamorous, not profitable anymore either, but it's in our blood. My grandfather built the fence lines with his own hands, and I've walked those same lines since I could walk at all. Nothing's ever happened out here. It's quiet land, familiar, predictable. That's why it stood out immediately, because nothing ever happens here. It was early March when it began. The snow was barely gone, the mud still thick. I remember because that morning I was checking the perimeter fence after a windstorm and saw tracks I couldn't place. Big ones, bigger than any coyote or stray dog. The spacing was odd too, longer strides than any animal we'd normally get. No claws, no hooves, just long, narrow indentations, too clean for a wild animal and too deep for anything light. Whatever made them was heavy. It had weight. I followed them for a few yards before they vanished into a patch of dry grass. That's not unusual, maybe. Wind shifts, ground dries. But there was a weird smell in the air, like wet fur left out too long. And the cattle on the west pasture were acting skittish, clustered by the far fence, facing the same direction. I called my neighbor Hank that evening. He's got a ranch 2 miles west and keeps a trail cam for deer. He's the type that logs every fox and raccoon he sees. I figured maybe he'd seen it too. "Nothing strange," he said after checking. "Plenty of coyotes, a bobcat 2 weeks ago. No wolves, no cougars." I let it go. 2 days later, one of my calves went missing. Just one. A week old, healthy, branded. The weird thing is there was no blood, no signs of a struggle. The mother was pacing in tight circles by the fence post, vocalizing non-stop like she didn't know where to direct her fear. I've seen coyotes drag off a newborn, sure, but they always leave something. Fur, tracks, noise, something. This was clean, too clean. I told myself it was a fluke. That night, I woke up to the dogs barking like mad. They're usually lazy as hell, but something had set them off, hackles up, low growling at the front door. When I stepped out with a flashlight, the beam caught movement past the barn. Not a full figure, just something slipping behind the feed silo. It moved too fast. Not like a deer bounding. It was low to the ground and smooth, almost gliding. I walked out with the shotgun, heart thudding louder than my boots. But there was nothing. Just empty shadows and cold air. I stayed outside for another 10 minutes before calling the dogs back in. But the next morning, I found the gate unlatched. The latch is heavy duty, not something that swings open in the wind. You've got to lift it, pull, and then twist. Even my nephew has trouble with it. I checked for footprints. Nothing. Just the sound of the cattle stirring and that awful wet smell again. That was when I installed the trail cams. 3 of them. One near the barn, one facing the main pasture, one at the far end of the property by the trees where the power lines cut through. I set them to high motion sensitivity and waited. It only took one night. The footage from the camera near the barn was jittery, blurry, like it glitched, even though I'd tested it twice. But in 2 of the frames, you could barely make out a shape. Crouched low between the shadows. It looked like a person, but the limbs were too long, the knees bent the wrong way, and the eyes, 2 faint glints, too far apart. I paused the frame, stared at it for a long time, then closed my laptop. I told no one. That day, I drove into town and picked up 2 new locks, reinforced, combination keypads. I didn't even trust myself with them. That night, I double-checked every gate, every latch, every camera. I locked the dogs inside. I stayed up until 3 a.m., watching the monitor feed from my laptop. The cameras were still glitching. At exactly 2:41 a.m., all 3 froze for 5 seconds, then resumed. Nothing after. No movement. No sound. Just silence. But in the morning, a second calf was missing. After the second calf vanished, something shifted in me. I stopped pretending this was normal. I've dealt with loss on a ranch, sickness, stillbirth, predators. That's part of the job. But this wasn't natural. This wasn't weather or wildlife. It was something else. I started keeping the porch lights on all night. Every evening before sunset, I'd walk the perimeter, locking everything twice. My shotgun slept by the door, and I stopped going outside after dark. It wasn't fear exactly. It was instinct. A gnawing, ancestral kind of unease that hums in your bones when you know the dark is watching you back. A week passed. No more calves disappeared. The trail cams didn't catch anything, not even rabbits. It was like the land was holding its breath. The air was still, oppressively quiet. Birds had stopped nesting near the barn. Even the dogs paced restlessly inside, staring at walls and whining at empty corners. Then one morning, I found something by the fence. It wasn't a calf this time. It was a single, split hoof, cleanly severed, dried, like it had been lying out for days, though I'd walked that stretch just the day before. There was no blood. Just the hoof, sitting upright in the dirt like it had been placed there. That same day, my neighbor Hank called. His voice was shaky. He asked if I'd heard anything strange the night before. I said no, and he paused for a long time before muttering, "Something's walking around our barn. Not coyotes, not raccoons. It doesn't sound right." Then he hung up. 2 nights later, the dogs woke me again. But this time, they didn't bark. They didn't growl. They just stood, hackles raised, staring at the back door, completely silent. Rigid. That silence is worse than barking. I checked the feed monitor, a simple motion sensor I'd added after the calf losses. The barn door was open. I grabbed the shotgun, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The wind had picked up, but everything else was still, deathly still. I walked toward the barn. My boots scraped gravel. Every step felt louder than it should have. I could hear the cattle rustling inside, shifting nervously. And then I saw it. Not in the light, in the absence of it. Between the barn and the silo stood something tall, wrong. Its shape was hard to track, like smoke or a heat shimmer, and its head was too low, slumped forward as if it didn't belong to the shoulders beneath it. I raised the flashlight, but the beam stuttered, shorted. I swear on my mother's grave, it dimmed on its own. I backed away, slowly, didn't blink, didn't breathe, and then the thing moved, not toward me, but into the barn. I heard the cattle panic. Their hooves thundered against the ground, a loud crash, and then silence. I ran back inside, locked every door, and didn't sleep. At dawn, I walked back out. The barn was a mess, feed scattered, fence broken, but the cattle were unharmed, all of them. No sign of the creature, no prints, nothing. Except one of the cows had a mark on its hide, burned into the skin, a shape I didn't recognize, like a jagged circle with a slash through it. Wasn't a brand. I didn't call the vet. I didn't want anyone else on the land. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of fungus or an injury I hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew better. That burned shape, it wasn't random. It was intentional, geometric, precise. That day, I stayed close to the house. I didn't work the fence. I didn't check the perimeter. I just waited. And I watched. Around dusk, the air changed. Not the temperature, just the feel of it. Like pressure, or electricity, or the way the world holds still before a storm. The wind stopped. The insects went quiet. And somewhere out near the barn, the cattle started to moan. Not in pain, but in warning. I opened the back door just a crack and looked out. It was back. But this time, it wasn't hiding. It stood right by the barn, taller than the doorframe, shifting in and out of focus. Like my eyes couldn't hold on to it. Like my brain kept refusing to process what it was seeing. Its legs were too long, bent wrong, its head still slumped, like it was hanging by a thread. But what made me cold, truly cold, was how still it was. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, watching the house, watching me. I closed the door. I sat in the dark for hours, not reading, not thinking, just listening to the creaks in the wood, to the silence outside, to the sound of my own pulse ticking behind my ears like a countdown. Then, right around 3 a.m., the dog started growling. Low, barely audible. I got up. The back door was still locked. The flashlight was fully charged. I stepped out and scanned the yard. Nothing. No prints. No sign of movement. The barn was intact. The cattle were calm. Everything. Normal. Except the silo. The old grain silo hadn't been used in years. We hadn't touched it since before Dad passed. But now the door was open. Just a crack. I didn't want to look. But something inside me said I had to. Not because I was brave, but because I wouldn't sleep again until I did. I approached slowly, the gravel crunching underfoot, my flashlight trembling in my grip. I reached the door, pushed it open. At first, nothing, just dust and shadow. Then the beam found the far wall, and something scrawled on it in dark, jagged charcoal. Lines, circles, symbols. That same strange shape, over and over, and words, all in my handwriting. Don't watch it. It watches you. I don't remember writing that, but my flashlight was still in my hand, and there was fresh charcoal dust on my fingertips. I ran. I don't remember much of the next few days. I packed. I sold the cattle. I boarded up the barn and the silo and left the ranch keys on the kitchen table. I didn't even tell Hank I was leaving. I moved 2 states away. I work in town now. No livestock, no wide open fields, no tall grass or quiet barns, and definitely no silos. But every once in a while, when the streetlights flicker or the dogs start growling at the back window, I get the feeling that I left something behind. Or maybe it followed me anyway.